This meeting is being recorded.
All right, so EksAyn. That might be. Listen, I have recorded almost 1,000 interviews. You by far might have the coolest name I think I've ever heard, not only on the podcast, but in my life. Like, you got to tell the story, man, of this name growing up. How it came.
Yeah, it's definitely a wild name, Larry. Thanks for having me on the show. You know,
Yeah.
they say it's Swedish, and I've got to tell you, I have been to Sweden, Larry, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, there's not a single person in Sweden with that name, EksAyn. If you meet anyone else with that name, they're in my family. They're not in Sweden. My wife, I always joke around. My wife calls me X. I don't know if that's a good thing if your wife calls you X, but I'm my wife's ex and we're married. So go figure.
Dude, if she does it in a loving way, I say that's a win. You know what I mean? Yeah, when you say it's Swedish and Swedish names, like, my mind, just because of the age I am, I automatically go to the Muppets, and I'm thinking of like the Swedish chef,
Yeah,
but like,
yeah. That's funny. Yep.
man, it's so good to have you on. What I can tell you is
Thanks,
the
Larry.
audience is obviously in for a real treat. You and I were talking about 15 minutes before we hit record today, and this is going to be such a powerful episode, and I can't wait to share your story. And I think what we're going to do what you're going to do, not we, is you're going to rattle the minds and the hearts of these men. And I truly can't wait to see the blessings that are going to come from this podcast. But before we get started, I want you to share with these guys what your current family looks like, how many kids you got, and what's going on there.
Okay. Well, I've got 5 kids. Got from 17 down to 4. We like to spend time together. Got a great wife. We love to travel, explore. I don't know. We have our issues like everybody else, but that's kind of the basic composition.
5 kids, 17 to 4. Okay, so what is the mix of daughters to sons?
I've got 2 beautiful daughters, 3 awesome sons, and a great wife. So I feel totally blessed.
And so when you say a great wife, right? I think when we talk to most men just in general, right? Like, you bring
Yeah.
up their wives, and I think in the everyday world, and I don't hear it. I don't, never really hear it on this podcast, right? There are things that I think guests that are the way guests are operating in their lives that make this marriage fulfilling, that ultimately connect you guys. But what is 1 or 2 or 3 things that you most appreciate about your wife? Because even the way that you talk about her, like, there's just this sense that I get from you that you just really appreciate this woman.
Well, I got to tell you, my wife, gosh, she's a spiritual supermodel. Just
Awesome.
great mom, takes care of our kids. Really, really keyed into helping others, and a good example to me and my kids. I mean, I couldn't ask for someone better who could just nurture and be a good example to my kids. So
cool. And when
yeah.
you say spiritual, what does that mean?
Well, I think she's keyed into things that she may not even realize she's keyed in. She just has a really good sense for kind of what people need, what our children need. Always out serving people, trying to take care of people. Which for me, I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, trying to be like the Savior, I think she does a great job. She's a great example to our family.
It's incredible to be married to a woman who's spiritual. I share in your joy in that. My wife I've known my wife for 25 years. We've been married for 19. And she's always just been that really fantastic spiritual person in our marriage. And I say this kind of shamefully, but for the first 17 years of our marriage, she was the leader of our spiritual home. That's now switched a little bit. We were definitely more collaborative and aligned. I've reignited my faith as of a couple of years ago, going through some things myself. And it's a big part of our life. It's a big part of our kids' lives. And it's really important. Did you guys
Awesome.
ever Thank you. Did you guys ever imagine, though? I mean, were 5 kids in the plan, or we just sort of like, whatever happens, happens?
Oh man, actually, I came from a large family and really liked it. In fact, I got to tell you, my dad and great man, and unfortunately, he's struggling. He's got stage 4 cancer right now. But I got to tell you, he's got 8 kids. He's got 50, I think 54 grandkids now.
What?
And it's been so amazing for my family to have all these cousins, to have all these friends to play with. So when we have family reunions, it's like a subculture. I mean, just this herd of kids running through the house. I mean, it's amazing. But it's really been fun for my kids to have so many cousins. And so I kind of came from this big family. And I kind of just wanted to have a big family myself. And yeah, are there challenges to it? Yeah, there are. At the same time, like it's fun because they have friends, they have brothers and sisters together, they love each other. And so I'm kind of for it. I know that's a little old fashioned, but I like it.
So you were one of 8.
Can you believe that? I was.
I mean, okay. Wow. So where are you in the mix of your siblings?
Well, I'm second. And let me tell you a story just so you
Yeah.
Because there's a little bit of an interesting story. In fact, let me back up for a second here. When I was young, I used to like to draw these trees, and I used to draw them with every leaf, every vein in the leaves. I'd draw every branch and twig. It'd take me a long time, but you can imagine a tree with at least dozens of leaves. And I went to school later, and I know this. I'm answering your question. We're kind of going a roundabout way here. I went to school later, and I heard how the other children. I saw how the other children drew trees, and you can guess how they drew trees. It was kind of 2 lines with a little poofy cloud on top, kind of like a broccoli on steroids,
Yeah.
And when I saw how the other children drew trees, I stopped drawing them the way I used to, and I started drawing them the way the other children did. And when my mom saw this, I found out later that she cried. You can probably imagine why. I was kind of giving up a little bit of myself to try to fit in with the other kids. Anyway, fast forward a few years, I'm at a little league baseball game, and there's a few different ways to play little league. You can either be good, which I was not, okay, or you could be pathetic, like I was, which is you just hold the bat out and the ball hits it and falls. It's called a bunt. As an 8-year-old boy, yeah, as an 8-year-old kid, I had 1 bunt the entire season. I was pathetic, but anyway, I'm not here to tell you how bad I was. There was something significant after this game. We went home, and my mom complained of a very severe headache. She said it was worse than childbirth. Now, I haven't experienced childbirth, but I hear it can be pretty intense. My dad became very concerned, and he decided to take mom to the hospital. And I remember standing there in the front room of our home, and I gave my mom a hug and said, "I love you." And watched my mom and dad drive away. And I was a little concerned because this hadn't happened before. And my uncle and aunt happened to be visiting at the time. And I went to my uncle and I said, "Is my mom going to die?" And he was just trying to be a good uncle. And he said, "No, she's not going to die. She probably just has a migraine." And I said, do you promise my mom's not going to die? And he said, "I promise your mom's not going to die. She's going to be just fine. Just relax." And I wanted to believe him. And I went downstairs and I climbed up on my bunk bed, and I started reading this book about squirrels. I still remember the book. Anyway, I waited for my parents to get home, and I waited and they didn't get home. And it was probably 2 or 3 in the morning before I finally fell asleep. Anyway, the next day I got off climbed off my bunk bed, kind of anxious to see my dad and mom. And I went out to my room, and there was this door. When you open the door to my room in the basement where I was, there was this kind of long family room on the other side. And I opened the door to my room. I looked out wanting to see my parents, and on the other side of this room, I could see my dad. But something was different. My mom was not there. Instead, there was a friend and another friend. There was a neighbor and another neighbor. It felt like half the neighborhood was at my home. And as I walked closer, I could see my dad had been crying. My dad had tears on his cheeks. And as I got even closer, through his tears, and he was trying to choke back his tears, my dad said words that I'll never forget. He said, "I think our mom is going to leave us." And it kind of sent me into a panic. I put two and two together, and I started just saying, Dad, we got to do something. We got to say a prayer. We got to do something. I went into this real panic. Well, what had happened is my mom had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage, which means a blood vessel in her brain had burst. And she was now brain dead at the hospital, being kept alive by a life support system. A couple days later, I remember we were at the hospital. I could see my mom's chest kind of rising and falling with the help of a machine. It seemed really unnatural to me as an 8-year-old boy. And there came a moment where, there was nothing they could do. She was brain dead, and they unplugged her. It was scary, the whole thing. I remember when they took her off the life support system that she kind of crinkled up and turned bluish. And I wanted to give her a kiss, but I was afraid to. And so I kind of went up and I faked a kiss about 2 inches from her head and walked out. Now, there was an anesthesiologist in the room who happened to be a friend of our family, who said that after I left the room that my mom kind of went from being crinkled up to where she kind of spread her arms out like angel's wings, almost like she was coming into a beautiful place. But I got to tell you, as an 8-year-old boy, I watched my mom die. And here's my question for you and for all the listeners today. How do you think I draw trees now?
I have no doubt. I
draw them the way my mom would want me to, the way way I see them. And I got to tell you, Larry, right now, figuratively, right now in this moment, I'm drawing trees the way I see them. I'm sharing my heart with you. I'm drawing trees the way I see them. And even though I haven't given my mom a hug, and it's been over 36 years now, there's something that's almost as good as giving your mom a hug, and it's feeling her influence. And I don't feel it all the time, but I got to tell you, there's been a handful of times where I have felt my mom there with me. And so back to your question, my mom at age 32 left 7 kids, 7 children. My dad was 34. He was now a widower with 7 children. And I got to tell you, I look back on that now and I think, man, my dad is a good guy. My dad was a believer. He kept doing what he felt was right. He ended up getting married again, had another child with my stepmom. So we have 8 kids. He has 8 kids. And so, yeah, when we have family reunions, it's incredible. Okay. So it's really loud, but it's really fun. So.
So I told you before, we got started today that I've gotten really choked up on about 3 or 4 episodes at the most. And this is definitely one of them. Because the way you tell that story, I feel like I'm walking it right alongside of you because of the level of detail, the emotions, even seeing it through the eyes of an 8-year-old boy. I have an 8-year-old boy, and I can only imagine what that would be like. And you know, your book, I want you to share the title of your book that you have.
Well, it's called What I Want My Children to Know Before I Die. And it's, here's the thing, Larry. My mom was healthy as could be at age 32. She was healthy. She went to my baseball game. She liked to water ski. She liked to, do things. She was active. She was even, goodness, she was nursing. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but she was breastfeeding my youngest brother, who was only 7 weeks old at the time. Healthy, just a healthy person. And just like that, she was gone. And one of the things that I think is important for you and I and all the listeners here to remember is that life is shorter than you think. It can end at any moment. And so the legacy that we leave our kids, it's important we tell them we love them, right? It's important we tell them today before the sun goes down. Tell your kids you love them. Tell your wife you love her. Tell the people who you love that you love them. And just really remember that life is shorter than you think. So yeah, I wrote this book to try to inspire to inspire it was specific advice for my kids. Also tells the story a little bit about my mom there and some other things, but it was advice for my kids that if I were to die tomorrow, I'd want to make sure even my younger four-year-old who doesn't understand much right now would be able to say, "Oh, this is how my dad thought. This is what he's thinking."
Well, first of all, I just want to appreciate and honor you for sharing your story. This is not easy, right? To share a story that you have to relive, right? I want to
Thanks,
throw out
sir.
yeah, man. I want to throw out a question to you now so you can just sort of gel on it for just a minute while I talk for about 90 seconds or so about just some themes that really emerged for me through your story. So here's the question. Looking back on your first 8 years with your mom and some of the things that you might have learned from her just in that short time that serve you very powerfully today, I would love for you to just share what those things are. The reflection that I have is you're absolutely right. And I want men to get this through their head and through their heart. Life is fleeting. It's so fast. You have a 17-year-old. That's your oldest. I have a 16-year-old. He's my oldest. And when my son turned 16, I cried when he blew out his candles. And I didn't like weep or anything like that, but I shed a tear. Like I got misty eyed. And I gave him a hug and I said, "Happy birthday, man." And he looked at me. He just kind of cocked his head. He goes, Are you trying not to cry? I was like, "Yeah, a little bit." He's like, "Why?" I was like, "Ethan, I remember the moment you were born. Like, I remember seeing you born. I remember vividly, like it was yesterday. I remember the black martial arts shirt and the jeans I was wearing the day you were born and holding you and looking at you. And here you are 16 years later." And the reason I'm misty-eyed is because for several reasons. Number one, I'm proud of the man that you are. I'm proud of your character. I'm proud of how compassionate and empathetic you are, how you have a passion for music, and you're so giving and generous with your heart. And I'm also emotional because I seriously can't believe how fast it's gone. That it was just yesterday. This is my memory. And the final thing I'll say is this. I told him, I said, "Ethan, it used to annoy me when you were born and people would be like, you need to cherish it. It's here today, gone tomorrow. It's going to go faster than you think." And I'm like, whatever. I've heard that forever. But Ethan, it is insanely true. And what I can also tell you is that it actually went faster than what I thought, and it went faster than what people thought. Like I can't even believe it's been 16 years. And so the message I want to get through men before you answer that question is that's why. That is why I always say live legendary. That your legacy is forever. Live legendary. Live today as if it was your last day. When you go to your when you are lying on your deathbed, we want all men who listen to this podcast, whether you're a member of our community, whether you're in our mastermind, or you just listen to the podcast, we want you to leave this life and enter the next with a smile, knowing that you gave it all you had, that you weren't in the grind and in the drift and your kids were a fleeting memory and you wish you would have done things differently. No, you captured it and you did it. And it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, but you did it with everything you had. So going back to the question, what were some things that you truly appreciate that maybe either your mom taught you or just showed you by example? What were those things that serve you today?
Super good question. By the way, I got to tell you, as you were talking about your son, just as a side note here, Larry, I didn't think you were going to make me tear up, but you did. I got to tell you, I remember holding my oldest daughter when she was born. And every time she comes back from college, I try not to cry because she's sitting there, it's so, it does go fast. It does go fast. There are so many things that I could tell you about my mom. Just, like, for example, just the fact that I knew she wanted me to be myself, to draw trees the way I said it, the way I saw them, the way that she wanted me to be who I was. I remember one time, and my mom was a believer. One time she told me, she said, X, I want you to know the church is true. It took me 3 seconds in the hallway. Less than 5 seconds anyway. It's just my mom and I in that hallway together. There was no fanfare. There was nothing intense about going on. And I made plenty of mistakes in my life, but like, I can still hear her words to me in that hallway where she said that. But one of the things I want, I guess, dads to know would just be that the little tiny things you do. I mean, just knowing that my mom wanted me to draw trees the way I say them, that comment she made in the hallway, those have profound effects on me now, even though she hasn't been around for decades. And the little things that dads do, just the little things, are going to filter through generations. I mean, the stuff my mom did is affecting my kids, grandchildren who she never met. I'm convinced it's going to go down for generations. The other thing is that, we as men, we have responsibilities. We try to provide for our families. We try to take care of ourselves, our health, our finances, all that. And that's all great. It's all noble. One of the things I ask people sometimes is I say, do you know what your great-great-grandfather did for a living? And so when I say great-great-grandfather, or, most people, when I ask them that, can't tell you. Occasionally I'll get somebody say, oh yeah, he was a rancher, he was a farmer, he was whatever. But then I'll remind them, I'll say, well, you do know you had 8 great-great-grandfathers. You know what they all did. And most of them can't tell you, And here's the bad news. The bad news is our great-great-grandkids are probably going to care about as much about what we did for a living as we care about what our great-great-grandfather did. What we did for a living is not going to make a huge difference to, 3, 4, 5 generations down the road. They won't care. But the kind of dad we were, the kind of dad we are now, will affect them profoundly for hundreds of years, for generations. I mean, forever, I think. But let me just give you one example. I live in America. Okay. Now, the reason I live in America is because one of my great, I can't remember how many greats back, hundreds of years ago, decided to get on a boat from Europe and come to America. So that one choice that grandparent of mine, many hundreds, centuries ago made, it affects my educational opportunities, affects my economic opportunities, my employment, my religion, my culture. So much was affected by that person who lived hundreds of years ago. Now, that's kind of an obvious example because, okay, it's geographical. I mean, they used to live in Europe. Now they moved to America, and now they live here in America. But there's other things that are just as real that are less visible. Like, for example, were they patient? Were they mean? Were they checked in? Were they hard workers? Were they drunk? What were they doing as a dad? And that stuff can filter down through generations. It's just not as visible. And so I really believe that, and I'm so glad, Larry, that you're doing this show for dads. Man, it's such a great thing you're doing. To tell people to live legendary, such a great thing, because it's going to be passed on. The choices that we make as dads, it's going to be passed on way, way longer, way after we're gone. That legacy will live. And by the way, it's going to live longer than our businesses. And by the way, I'm not saying anything about not trying to have a successful business. I mean, let's make it as successful as we can. But they did a study, I think it was on the BBC, they had a study, and I can't remember where it was, that said even in the S&P 500, most businesses in 15 years are going to be different. They're going to be bought, sold, bankrupted, disrupted. I mean, most businesses that we do, give it a couple decades, they'll probably won't be around. But that influence we have as a dad inside the walls of our own home, it's going to last a long time.
I totally agree with you, man. Many of the audience knows my story, as it relates to being, a father and the motivation that I have to be a father. And to be honest, so my biological father left when I was about 9 months old. Well, not left, but my mom and him got divorced. Young guy at the time, in his mid-20s. Signed over parental rights. I obviously didn't know that. I was too young, to a man that my mom married when I was just 4 years old. Sorry, I have no idea how to turn these notifications off. They just keep popping up. Sorry, guys in the audience. I am on a computer I'm not normally on because my other one is updating, so I do apologize. But what I can tell you is that I met my father by accident again when I was 12. By accident. We hung out for like 6 months, and he was remarried. So he had a 2-year-old son, another one on the way. About month 6, he kind of told me like, hey, it's me, it's not you. I can't really, it's too complicated. I'm trying to start over. And I ran into him when I was 30, 18 years later in a Starbucks as a fluke. I was there for a meeting for business, and who came walking in to get his morning coffee but my father. Now that impacted me positively and negatively, right? Negatively because there's like, wow, this hurts. Like, this really sucks. And by the way, like, what was going through his mind all these years? And what I will tell you is my dad is, he owns every bit of it. He's just like, dumb move. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time, but it wasn't. And what I will tell you is that gave me extreme motivation to show up for my kids. And I'll be real honest with you. On a lot of days, I fall flat on my face. I'm raising 4 boys, 16, 14, 8, and 6. And I hope to God that they have, the same forgiveness that I have found with my own father for me. Because as much as I try to do good work with them, I fail a lot. I think being a successful father is getting your hands dirty, playing out on the field and not on the sidelines, right? If you're on the bench, you're not going to get tackled. You're not going to get your rear end handed to you. If you're out on the field, you're going to make some good plays, and you're also just going to get it handed to you, right?
That's right.
And both are going to serve you. But I'm willing to play on the field. And you have these beautiful children in your life. And you have 17 to 4 years old. And you have this background and this blueprint that really impacted you at 8 years old. And I just
Yeah.
want to know, just for you personally, what is the daily life for you as you communicate with them, as you connect with them? Because I have to think that the experience you have with your mom, right? That that constantly plays in the background of your entire life, and it allows you, I think, for
My
your own
turn.
personal operating system. That's okay.
My fault. Sorry, I thought I had to turn
No,
that off.
no, we're both busy dads. It's okay. But it's always in the background of your operating system of what you do and how you operate in life and as a dad. So what's a life? What's the daily life for you? How you operate with your kids?
Super good question. And before I answer that, I just got to give you props though first, Larry, because I think it was Gandhi. At least I saw a quote by Gandhi that says something like this: "We must be the change we wish to see in the world."
Yeah.
And here you are in a situation where you are being the change you want to see. That's awesome, Larry. I mean, seriously, the fact that you're doing this podcast, the fact that you're trying to be a good dad and be there for your kids, my hat's off to you. So wonderful. Good for you. You know, well, so I'm not always good at it here either, I'll tell you, but I'll tell you what I try to do. When we get up in the morning, we try to, be together, pray together as a family. We'll even read scriptures together as a family, even my little 4-year-old. And it's interesting because I read something. I have a brother who's actually really smart. He actually went to Harvard and got a degree in education. And we talk about education all the time. And he says, you know what? It's really good for kids to have a rich language environment. So what that means is I try to expose my kids to a lot of different words right in the morning, right? So when we read scriptures, there's a lot of words that like a typical 4-year-old doesn't understand, right? But I think just letting those words kind of come over has helped. And just kind of as a side note, I try to give my kids a hug every morning, tell them I love them. Not afraid to say I love you in my home. And I think that's important. One of the things, let me tell you something that's interesting. I think sometimes our kids can really surprise us. And if we as their dads, because they look to us for confidence. And let me just tell you a story that taught me a lesson. She's 8 now, but when she was 5 years old, my daughter, she begged me, she said, "Hey dad, can I hike this mountain?" There's a mountain by our home called Timpanogos, and it's about 11,700 feet high. It's a decent sized mountain. Anyway, she asked me when she was 5, she said, "Hey dad, can I hike this mountain?" And of course, my first inkling was, come on, it's 11,700 feet. She's 5 years old, And there was a part of me that said, no, you shouldn't do that. But I actually said to her, well, are you sure you want to do this? And I said, if you were to hike a mountain like that, you would probably have really sore feet. It would take all day. We'd have to hike while you were tired. It would be really bad. She's like, Dad, I want to do it. I want to do it. I want to do it. And anyway, I told her, I said, okay, if you really want to do it. And I took her on a few warm-up hikes. Anyway, she was determined, and I said, oh, let's do it. Anyway, she hiked this mountain all the way to the top, all 11,700 feet. And all these adults were coming down, giving her high fives. And when she got to the top there, she got kind of a standing ovation from all the adults who were up there giving her a standing ovation. But she surprised me. Here was my 5-year-old daughter who I thought probably couldn't make it, but she was determined to. And for some reason on this one, I did get it right. And I said, I'll let you do it if you want to, but I want to kind of psychologically prep you. And she did it. But back to your question on a daily basis, I'm trying, and I failed too. I got to tell you, I read this book that my brother recommended. And it's this book, it's got it right here on this. It's called The Power of Positive Parenting by Glenn Latham. And it changed the way I parented, because one of the things he says in this book, he says, if you can remember that behaviors are like seeds. So if you can imagine a little seed in the ground, And attention, especially with children, is like water. So we water the behaviors we want to see grow with attention. That thought right there was really changed the way I parented, because I think as dads, sometimes we're so keyed in, we want to correct people. We want to say, hey, if you only did this right, or you didn't do this right. You know, you hear parents and they'll say, hey, have you ever seen a parent, the kid walks in and the parent says, hey, you stayed up till 3 o'clock. And I can't believe you stayed up till 3 a.m. last night and you didn't make your bed and you got a C- on your test. And you're playing video games too much or whatever. And they say all these things. Well, what that parent's doing that I learned in this book is that they're watering the behaviors they don't want to see grow with attention. And they're actually making it more likely that those behaviors will occur. And one of the things that he talks about in this book is he says, you know what? Positive reinforcement, which is catching people doing something right, is the most effective way to shape human behavior long run. So it's less effective to point out what they're doing wrong by a long shot. It's less effective to try to punish them into doing something. If you can catch them doing something right, it grows that behavior. And so, you know, I tried to, you know, I got to tell you, my daughter once got up many years ago, and I just barely learned about this. And she came and knocked on my door and she said, hey, Dad, I made my bed. I made my lunch. I'm ready for school. Surprise. I mean, she was trying to surprise me. And I went back to my wife in the closet. We were just chatting in the closet in our room there. And I said, you know what, let's try this positive reinforcement stuff. Let's give her a lot of attention for this. And so I went out there and I said, hey, look, your bed looks great. Your bed's made, your lunch is made. I'm so proud of you for just taking the initiative and doing a great job. And my wife kind of laid it on thick too. Well, it was really interesting because guess what happened?
Start doing it every day.
She did it again, and we kept giving it attention, right? What would have been less effective was for me to wait till she sleeps in, doesn't make her lunch, doesn't make her bed, and then walk in and say, how many times do I have to tell you to make your bed, make your lunch, and get up for school? I mean, if I told you once, I've told you, I mean, I could be that would be less effective. In fact, the studies show that it would actually make her more likely to sleep in and not make her lunch and not make her bed because she's getting attention for it. And so as we're trying to be good dads, and this is something I'm so grateful I ran into, was just, if I can just catch my kids doing something right. Whenever I see a behavior, and I got to tell you, it happens more than people think. Let me give you one more example. There was this kid who was sent to the principal's office all the time, and it became such a big deal that they had to, they got the school counselor involved and said, hey, this kid's getting sent to the principal's office. How can we fix this? And so the counselor went down and sat and watched this kid. And she noticed that the kid was doing a ton of stuff right, but getting zero attention for it, like nothing. But as soon as he'd do something wrong, the teacher would put his name on the board. So there's a little attention, right? Then he put a check mark and there's a little more attention and another check mark. And eventually got to the point where they had to march him down. And then they got to this place in the school where the kid was actually set next to this window. They sat him down next to this window where he was waving to his friends as they came by during lunchtime, because it was lunchtime when he got there. So like he was getting a lot of attention for being in trouble. And then of course the principal would come in and say, now, why are you doing these things? And give him a lot of attention. And so the counselor said, you know what, this is really pretty predictable. I mean, this kid is getting zero attention for doing what's right and getting a lot of attention for doing what's wrong. You're feeding the weeds. I mean, you don't water the weeds, you water the stuff you want to have grow, right? And in this book, and he says this a million times in this book. In fact, I'm going to read it to you. Hopefully, see if I can find it here. He says, and I'll just read it word for word. It says, research has shown that the most effective way to reduce problem behavior in children is to strengthen desirable behavior through positive reinforcement, rather than trying to weaken undesirable behavior through aversive or negative processes. In other words, if you want to get rid of bad behavior, the most effective way to do that is to focus on good behavior, and the weeds will kind of wither. Isn't that an interesting thing? So as a dad, that changed the way I thought about life. I was like, I'm going to see if I can key in and catch my kids doing as much stuff right as I possibly can, rather than try and always point out what they're doing wrong, which for me comes naturally, right? Like, especially as dads, like we kind of want us to fix things and change things. But that helped me. So I guess I got on a little bit of a tangent there, but I felt like I should share it.
That was gold, man. That was really gold. And when I mentioned, I hope my kids are forgiving and I fall flat on my face and, I get my rear end handed to me, that was a very powerful reminder of why I need to catch my kids doing good things. Because I'll tell you, I am extremely proficient at catching my kids doing something wrong. Like I'm almost probably, and as you read that passage, I'm too good at it. I might be an MVP at this point. So perhaps
I am too. we just got to keep working at it. I'm good at catching them doing stuff wrong too, and I know the principle, so I have no excuse, right? I need to be better at it myself.
Man, so first of all, thanks for that strong reminder. That is the first book. That's the first book I'm going to buy as soon as we're done with this podcast.
Super good book.
It's actually very serendipitous and crazy. Like when you ask a question, when I ask a question, like I was doing my morning reflection this morning, and I've got like this whole process around scripture, stoicism, journaling, and the daily verse of the day. So a lot of things that I reflect upon. And I was asking myself this morning, I was like, this is really, really profound. It's really effective in my life. It gets my head in the right space in the morning, but I need something else. I need one more add to. And an idea came to me. I'm a big fan of the 75 hard program, which is you're required to read 10 pages per day. I'm not doing 75 hard. It's not really on my radar right now. However, the thing I wrote down this morning was I need to find a book that I can dive into for parenting that I can get 10 pages in a day that will change my focus for the day. And then here you come on the podcast and talk about that book. And it was like this massive light bulb moment of like, and that's the book. It's like, you ask, you put the question out there, whether it's internal or external. I'm buying that.
Positive Power of Parenting by Glenn Latham. Great book. Awesome book.
I can't wait to get it. Hopefully I'll get it, prime same day. But, as we wrap up here, because the one thing I don't want to shortcut in the last 15 minutes of the show here is you have one more story that I think is powerful. And I want to make sure we give it ample time because I think it's another powerful reminder to the guys who are listening. And listen, there's obviously some sadness in this podcast, right? But I would ask men, just as you look at your kids through the lens of praise and appreciation and positive parenting, look at this podcast as an opportunity to shift your life based on the stories that you're sharing. But you have one more story, and I just want you to share it however it is that feels best for you.
Yeah, I'll do that. I have kind of two, but I'm going to wrap them together. Let me tell you this. My daughter Cheyenne was a beautiful angel baby. She had soft dark hair. She had deep, deep brown eyes. And of all my children, she was very, very calm. Like it was almost uncanny. She would sometimes just look up at me with these almost searching eyes, and she'd lock eyes with me. And she was so calm. Sometimes I'd have to stop what I was doing and just look back at her. And because it was just this interesting, calm feeling that she had as she just kind of looked in my eyes, almost like she was searching for something. Well, fast forward a little bit. I'm sitting in the side of the road, and I get a phone call from a stranger. And the stranger's voice says, "Your daughter has drowned. You need to come to the hospital." And I said, "What?" And they said it again. They said, "Your daughter has drowned. You need to come to the hospital." No, Larry, I don't remember how that conversation ended. Somehow, I drove to the hospital. Somehow I found a place to park. Somehow I found my way into the room where my daughter was. As I walked into this room, I could see my 9-month-old daughter on a hospital bed. She had tubes coming out of her nose. By the way, that wasn't the first time I'd seen someone I love with tubes coming out of her nose. I heard someone in the background say the words, brain dead. And that wasn't the first time I'd heard those words either. As I walked into that room, there were a lot of people, Larry, who were not calm. But I just walked up and I touched my daughter's shoulder. I just got to tell you, as I touched her shoulder, I felt calm. Almost like she was looking up at me calm. Went to one of the EMTs in the room and I said, you know, I'm a big boy. I want to know what's going to happen to my daughter. And one of them said, I think she's going to make a really good donor. There were some people who thought maybe what he said was insensitive, but I never felt that way. He was straightforward and told me. Anyway, there came a time shortly after where I needed to life flight my daughter. The EMTs were moving slowly. They wheeled her out to an airplane. I got on the airplane. And we're flying somewhere over, thousands of feet above the Utah desert. There was a moment where I could see him respirating my daughter with a bulb that and for a moment I could feel the darkness coming in. And I just prayed, help me not to become bitter. And I got to tell you, that prayer made all the difference. I haven't been. Anyway, the plane landed, got in an ambulance, drove up to the specialized hospital. Long story short, the doctor said it didn't look good. And for the second time in my life, I got to see someone I love taken off of life support. My daughter had a little bit of brainstem functioning, so she could breathe. It wasn't very well, but just a little bit. And when they took her off, I just held her in my arms. Will you tell the people that you love them? Will you do that before the sun goes down today? And will you remember that life is shorter than you think? I got to tell one more story because it has to do with this. There was a guy named Stephen Covey. He wrote a book 20 years ago or more, probably. I don't remember exactly. He wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It was a huge seller. But he had somebody come up to him after a conference. And this person came up to him after the conference and said something that kind of surprised him. He said, I don't love my wife anymore. Stephen Covey looked at the guy and said something like this. He said, well, then love her.
Yeah.
And the guy said, I don't think you heard me. I'm falling out of love. My wife's falling out of love with me. We've got 3 kids. We're probably heading for a divorce. It kind of worries me. Maybe you've heard this story before, but Stephen Covey said, well, if you're not feeling it, that would be a good reason to love her. The guy said something like, well, how do you love someone you don't love? Stephen Covey said something to this effect, and I hope I'm quoting it right. Something to this effect. He said, you're acting like love is a feeling. Love isn't a feeling. Love is a verb. But if you do the verb, the feeling will follow. And I think this is a huge lesson for us as dads, for us as leaders of our home. Everybody we meet, you, me, all of us have a pain that nobody else knows about. No one can see it. And so when we choose to just treat people like that, sometimes our children have pain we can't see. Sometimes they come home from school, we can't see that somebody made fun of them or somebody didn't treat them right, and they're acting up a little bit because of it, but we can't see it. If we can just choose, even if we've had a rough day or we're not feeling like it, or the work's been hard, or we have a little strain here on our relationships or whatever, if we can just choose to love them and be strong and love them, that can make all the difference. So that's my story. Or 2.
This has been, so listen, I'm just going to apologize for just not knowing what to say. I as you're sharing this story, I'm so welled up with emotion as you tell it. And there's also a small part of me, as you were ending the story, asking myself, what do I say in response to this story? And I got to be honest, I don't have anything. I got nothing. I have nothing but appreciation and gratitude that you shared it, because it hit me so hard in the heart, and I'm sure the audience as well, as such a powerful reminder of capturing these moments, because they're fleeting. So I don't have the words, but I do have is gratitude for you. And I also have gratitude. Yeah. And I also have gratitude for your bravery. Like, listen, so not only bravery to share it and to remind all of us the importance of this, but there are 2 paths that you could go down as a human being. You could go down the path of, I'm going to be bitter for the rest of my life. And here's the thing, right? You could be, and everybody who knows you would give you a complete and total pass. Be like, of course, man, of course. Like, why wouldn't you be bitter? And then there's an opportunity to do what you've done, which is not hold on to bitterness, and to allow this to make pivots in your life that are more beneficial for you and the other people that do life with you. And by the way, the hundreds of thousands of people that listen to this podcast on a monthly basis, you've blessed them too. So thank you for that. And the final thing I'll say is I remember that story from Stephen Covey vividly. I graduated from college in 1999. I still had a cassette player in my car. I actually bought his book on cassette, and it was 6 cassettes. And I remember, I listened to it over and over again, even as a college student. I just loved the content that he had. And I will never, ever forget that story. And even his voice tone as he told it over audio, love is a verb. Love is a choice you make. Love is the things that you do. And I remember him, even accentuating the choice and you. And I remember that story clearly. And, but I just want to thank and honor you for sharing 2 stories that were very powerful, and just, you serve such a powerful reminder of what it means to be a dad, a husband, and a human being. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Larry. And I've got to turn it around on you. For somebody, your own story, where you could have chosen to be bitter. And yet here you are doing this podcast to try to help people. Props to you. You're doing your best to be a good dad, to be the change you want to see in the world. Like, you're inspiring to me, Larry. So I appreciate you making this podcast for dads. Try to help
Thank
dads be better. You're doing awesome.
I really appreciate you saying that. It wasn't always so. I lived in the other camp for quite some time in my 20s and early 30s. And then, once you realize that camp doesn't serve you and it hurts you, you got to do something different. And, but I appreciate that. I want to make sure that all the men can find you, everything you're doing in the world, and your book and all that good stuff.
Sure. So my name, there's nobody competing for my name. So if you want to look me up, you can go to Google, any search engine, and Google this name. I'll spell it slowly. EksAyn is my first name. I'm at EksAyn.com, which is EksAyn.com. My book is What I Want My Children to Know Before I Die. It's available on Amazon. It will be in bookstore soon. But I guess my main message is just, my mom, I'll just say it. My mom's mom, she passed on something that's still with me, generations later. She used to say, no matter the question, love is the answer. And I really believe that's true. If you're not feeling love for someone you should, like your wife or your kids, what's the answer? Just choose to love them, right? If you're not feeling love for your wife, go take out the trash for her, give her a foot rub, do the dishes, take the kids for a break, do something that is going to help her feel loved, even if you're not feeling it for her. And the feeling will follow. We can lead our feelings. And that's one of the biggest takeaways, I think, that we as dads, if we're not feeling it, we don't feel like being there for our kids, we don't feel like being there for our wives, just choose to love anyway. So thanks, Jerry.
So good, man. By far one of the most powerful episodes we've ever had. And nothing but gratitude that we did it today. Gentlemen, I have no doubt you want to connect with this man. I have no doubt you want to go grab a copy of this man's book, even if it's just to support this man's mission and what he's doing. Very powerful message today. All you have to do is head over to thedadedge.com/Friday. 57 for the show. Again, thedadedge.com/Friday 57. Can I ask you a favor?
Sure.
I always end the show with saying, gentlemen, go out and live legendary. I've always done it. Gentlemen, go out and live legendary. I don't think that's appropriate. What I think would be really appropriate is if you would like to say it, I would love for you to do it if you're cool with that.
What an honor. Thanks, Larry. Gentlemen, go out and live legendary.
Amen to that.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you.